session to Mr. K. Rubin.
A warm good afternoon to one and all. It's my privilege and honor to welcome a multifaceted scholar in this beautiful occasion. Hyderabad is the city of pearls, connected with beautiful aura. From this most adorable city, I would like to introduce an eminent hero. He is an assistant professor, English language instructor, curriculum developer, scholar, content editor, and translator. He has also worked as a resource faculty in teachers training program. He has completed his PhD thesis on the title Tracking Translations in 19th Century of Bengal, Construction of Identities in or Through Print focused on the questions of language, translation, and book history in colonial Bengal. Such a kind, tender, well-talented, and genuine personality adds beauty to our international conference on women in literature today with his grateful presence. It's my prestige to call upon Dr. Abhishek Ta, Assistant Professor, Department of English, School of Humanities and Science, Yale University, Hyderabad, to handle the session. The screen is up to you, sir. Please, sir.
Thank you so much for the generous and kind introduction. And I am really thankful to the organizers and all the dignitaries present here in this seminar. And I am honored to be part of this seminar where we can actually exchange and share our ideas about women, about the theme, the main theme of the conference, which is women in literature. So once again, I also should congratulate the organizers for organizing such a platform where where we can have a free exchange of such thoughts. So today I will be talking about the issues of gender and translation. It's basically on the intersections of gender and translation, in the sense that I want to focus on various aspects that relate to this area. Uh, uh, as we know, in general, the position of women in society and the position of translated literature in literary historiography, almost share a same fate, in the sense that they uh, they are judged through certain biases, and they are delegated to be unnecessary and irrelevant, sometimes and inferior, in both social history and in terms of women, and in literary history in terms of translated literature. So I would like to start my talk with a quotation from John Florio. He's a 16th century English British scholar who used to write on translations in 17th century onwards, and he was writing heavily on translations. So, so John Florio in 1603 is of the opinion that because they are necessarily, I quote, because they are necessarily defective, all translations are reputed females. So John Florio summarizes a heritage of double inferiority. Translators and women have historically been the weaker figures in their respective hierarchies. Translators are handmaidens to authors, women inferior to men. This forced partnership finds contemporary resonance in Nicole Ward Job's statement that the translator occupies culturally a female position, and Suzanne D. Harwood's echoing self-definition, "I am a translation because I am a woman," actually testifies, is a testimony to the established hierarchies in our society and in literary history. So whether affirmed or denounced, the femininity of translation is a persistent historical trope. Woman and translator have been relegated to the same position of discursive inferiority. The hierarchical authority of the original over the translated work is linked with the imagery of masculine and feminine. The original is often considered to be the strong generative male, and the translated work or the translation is often considered to be the weaker or derivative female. We are not surprised to learn that the language used to describe translating dips liberally into the vocabulary of sexism, drawing on images of dominance and inferiority, fidelity, and libertinage. The most persistent of these expressions, a French expression which describes translations, is quote unquote la belle infidelis, which means faithful but not beautiful, or beautiful but not faithful, has for centuries encouraged an attitude of suspicion towards the seemly but wayward translation. Feminist translation theory often aims to identify and critique the tangle of concepts which relegates both women and translation to the bottom of social and literary ladder. To do so, it must investigate the processes through which translation has come to be feminized and attempt to trouble the structures of authority which have maintained this association. What indeed are the processes through which translation maintains and activates gender constructs? To begin to answer this question, I have chosen to move along a number of planes. First, conceptual. How have the sides of translation theory been implicitly gendered, and how can this theory be transformed? This is the task of the introductory part of this talk, which brings together the work of theorists who seek to disturb the cliched language used to describe translation and to replace it with terms which convey the active play of identities within translation practice. They do so through their understanding of the performative and not simply representational or nature of language. Feminist translation thus reframes the quotation fidelity, which has played like a stultifying refrain through the history of translation. For feminist translation, fidelity is to be directed toward neither the author nor the reader, but toward the writing project, a project in which both writer and translator participate. participate. So gender difference has been play out not only in the metaphors of describing translation, but in actual practices of translation and translated literature in the specific social and historical forms through which women have understood and enacted their writing activities. So, on the one hand, translation was the means through which women, beginning in the European Middle Ages, particularly, were able to gain access to the world of letters. Long excluded from the privileges of the authorship, women turned to translation as a permissible form of public expression. Translation continued to serve as a kind of writer's apprenticeship for women into the 19th and 20th centuries. Uh, in addition, translation was an important part of the social uh, movements, uh, 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 in the sense that, in addition, because in the first wave feminism, we have closely observed that how this movement was closely associated with mm, uh, the first wave feminism was closely associated with this movement to move away from these stereotypical ideas and biases. So women started translating in order to build communication networks in the service of progressive political agendas and in the creative renewal of literary traditions. The great works of 19th and 20th century French, Russian, and German modernism were translated in part by women who made translation an expression of their political convictions. They believed that movements of literary exchange are vital to the democratic life of any nation. Uh, so, what this talk also wants to focus on certain issues like that. This was just the foregrounding on which I'm going to elaborate now. So this talk will be basically talking about these metaphors, the role of women in society, the role of translated literature, and in general, how women translators made it a point for themselves to take translations as their platform to voice their identities, their cultural identities, their gender identities, and everything uh, in turn. So transcultural and translingual developments in the women's movement and its various offshoots since the 1970s have implicated translation in every aspect of text production and reception, and have enormously expanded the thinking about and research on translation and gender. Diverse research initiatives have investigated the role played by translation in transmitting new socio-political ideas focused on gender and their literary expression across cultural boundaries. The roles played by women translators in the present and the past, their reception and influence have been studied. The importance of and the dangers involved in translating women's writing in an era of universalist notions about women and the challenges involved in facing and recognizing great differences between women have been discussed at length in the sphere of translation studies and in writings on translation. Women's representation in language, through language, and across languages, and women's participation in this work of representation have underlain the entire period since the early 1970s. More recently, ideas about gender instability have added new dimensions to the discussions and undermined the categories man, quote unquote, and woman on which earlier debates were founded. Queer as well as gay and lesbian studies concerned with other gender identities and in particular with individual choice in these matters have taken debates into other, though not necessarily new areas. In the Anglo-American realm, especially, the focus on gender over the last part of the 20th century has powerfully affected translation and been powerfully reflected by translation too. So, the paradigm that was shaped or reshaped by the women's movement in the 1970s onwards, and uh, the feminist thinkings and feminist activism and strongly affected translation and translation studies. After briefly reviewing a number of early publications, this talk wants to explore the work that has been done in the field since those first articles and books appeared. Um, mm, so, in the second part of this talk, my focus will be on the destabilization of the term gender, on what I have called I called the second paradigm, which took hold in early 1990s and is beginning to be reflected in translation studies, criticism, and theory. Both paradigms reflect the interest in identity that became so important in post 1960s North America and Canada, which was exacerbated by the French, English, and American Canadian divides. While these issues seem to have garnered enormous interest and exposure in the Anglo American realm, they are widespread. The conventional assumption that there are groups of people in each society and culture that can be identified as women or men, and who, because of this identification and self identification, are perceived and treated differently, with a group called women usually located in a subordinate position. To date, most publications bringing together gender issues and translation have subscribed to this first paradigm, the notion of gender as a set of characteristics and according to and behaviors imposed by the society, and a construct that forms an individual um, and according to which that individual identifies. Um, As Simon de Beauvoir dictum, um, one is not born a woman, one becomes one, so neatly implies that gender has been seen to imprint the dominant cultural expectations upon the male sexed or female sexed individual. Work in translation studies or in writings on translations carried out under this first paradigm tends to subscribe to ideas derived from feminist theories and practices, and thus focuses on women as a special minority group within patriarchal society that has been subject to usually biased treatment, including the area of translation as well. Um, the ideas derived from the relatively new paradigms that the diversity of sexual orientation and gender, class distinction, ethnicity, race, and other socio-political factors is so great that it is impossible or unwise or meaningless to identify anyone as primarily male or female, since so many other factors come into play. Still in development, this paradigm has been spawning work that focuses on gender as a discursive and contingent act and on its performative aspects. The idea that a translation too is a performance causes a certain tentative overlap between gender and translation uh, in this sense, where gender issues are often aligned with gay and lesbian identities and interests, and translation analyzes analysis tend to deal with works in which traditional ideas about two genders are called into question. So the notion of performativity seems to have led translation researchers to focus largely on the role played by the theatricality and linguistic markers in dialogue that signify these gender identities and gender norms. Just as in uh, just as in the theater, each performance is a passing phenomena. In translation too, under this paradigm, the translation is also viewed as a contingent and performative act. So it possesses a powerfully assertive and this idea is based more on fixed notions about gender identity which are limiting and restrictive, yet can be overcome or subverted, and the work is typically revisionist. It possesses a powerfully assertive translator exploring the misrepresentation of women authors in translation, the response the is invisibility of women translators, and the patriarchal aspects of translation theories. So, because of the powerful influence of language in applying and enforcing a society's notions about gender, gender expectations, and gender behavior, and in producing, creating, manipulating texts in translation, the two areas of study developed a productive overlap from the late 1970s onwards. Feminist critiques of the so-called mainstream patriarchal language that imposes gender restrictions through language and feminist ideas about women's agency, activism, creativity, and production soon countered traditional ideas about translation as a typically feminine activity of passive, yet often devious repetition, reproduction, or mere procreation rather than creative production. Probably the most voluble and influential proponent behind the idea of feminist translation as production of meaning has been Barbara Goddard, a translator of experimental feminist writing from Quebec and a professor of Canadian literature. Barbara Goddard uses the term woman handling to describe feminist approaches to translation and considers that feminist translators should flaunt their presence and agency in the text, making themselves and their work visible and thereby reversing the age old orders of translators and women's public and literary or scholarly invisibility. While Goddard's approach has been oriented towards creativity and visibility, thus revising the translation quite test that revising the translation mm, translations in various other forms of revisionism have also been highly visible in work on gender and translation. The title of Suzanne Hardwood's rebel at infidel signals an attack on established notions that connect translation with a patriarchal view of women, as implied in the expression label infidel, as I discussed earlier. The term was and still is used to describe translation done in 17th and 18th century France that improved the foreign text in translation, making it more beautiful until it corresponded to aesthetic notions of the time. So these terms challenge the implicit this rebel at infidel. This term particularly challenges the implicit misogyny of translation metaphors that are often employed in translation description or writings or translations. It show how such translation practices have actually occulted women's interests and ideas and presence in texts, and demonstrating how powerful a critically informed attitude on the part of women translator and translation more generally can be. Erishiman's Gender in Translation, Sherry Simmons, this is one of the path-breaking book discussing about the issues of gender and the role of women and women translators in literary theory and literary hierarchy. So Sherry Simmons' book was named Gender in Translation, Cultural Identity and the Politics of Transmission, published in 1996, where Simon uh, focuses on the interface between gender and translation, citing the famous dictum by John Florio that I quoted, that they are necessarily defective. All translations are necessarily defective, and hence they are all reputed females. So this kind of misogyny and bias mm, was contested in this book, and in a historical revision of translation, Simon then discusses influential, though largely ignored, women translators and their histories of working with male writers. She presents women's or feminist versions of the Bibles in different languages and studies the difficulties involved in translating the polysemous neologisms of French feminism, as well as the more general problems involved in translating women's writing across culture, espousing the current idea that translation produces knowledge and meaning and not just repetitions, and examining this idea in terms of women's struggle for political, social, and scholarly influence. Simon's work problematizes fidelity, the concept of fidelity, both in translation and human relations. Her work places this problem squarely within the climate of intellectual indeterminacy and relativism that developed in the last decades of the 20th century. Another such intervention in this area was done by a scholar named Louis van Plotho in 1997 in Translation and Gender, translating in the era of feminism in this book. Uh, Plotho makes a further clear connection between feminist politics and translation. It shows how cultural politics deriving from the women's movement and feminism have affected writing and translation, how translations examined from a feminist perspective may be seen to require revision and retranslation, and how feminist theories and translation theory come together to counteract what one critic has called the androcentric slide into gender as a trope in the postmodern translation theory. I the in a, like For example, the gathered tropes of translations like la, belle, infidel that continue to proliferate. Much of this work has been supported by an important theoretical or historical text entitled Gender and Metaphorics of Translation by Laurie Chamberlain as well. Laurie Chamberlain examines how theoretical and philosophical questions about language, mythologies, ancient authoritative texts, and the symbolic intent and impact of gendered metaphors of translations are linked to and reflect the power relations within heterosexual unions that regulate marriage, reproduction, and especially the control over offspring through the control of women's sexuality. Chamberlain's contention is that The ancient and ongoing derogatory link between women and translation, which has been expressed in countless metaphors used to describe translation over the centuries, has to do with a struggle for power and authority between the sexes that result directly from men's fear about women's sexual infidelity. Uh, Sorry for the interruption. Yeah, sorry for the pause. And Chamberlain's work also continues to incite theoretical approaches. Among them, an important recent piece, Pandora's Tongues, published in 2000 by Karen Litu, reviews and contrasts the two main myths in Western thinking upon which translation hinges: the mythical tale of the Tower of Babel and that of Pandora. Litu sets out to reappropriate Pandora's story for feminist translation theory and locates the source of the traditional view of Pandora, releasing linguistic chaos in phallocentric anxieties about women, both as regards language, the mother tongue, and as regards her gender, that is, female sexuality. She then develops a complex argument around the psychoanalytic work of Lucy Irigaray that posits women's sexual and psychological multiplicity to argue against the search for one true meaning in translation that has underlain translation theories based on Babel, traditional psychoanalytic sexual anxieties, and the mythic messianic notions about a return to one language, and so on. So, multiplicity in meaning and in textual and visual representations of meaning, and especially in the seriality of translation, is connected here to plenitude, to the uh, to the idea that is sometimes pictured with, and to a deconstructive revision of gender symbolics. Both Chamberlain and Karin Litu provide theoretical approaches that go beyond the earlier revisionism and rewriting of translation history with regard to gender, and stimulate more speculative work on the myths and symbols that underlie Western culture and play into the work of representation and rewriting, that is, translation. However, a very important body of work that addresses theory, mythology, and symbolics began to appear a good 10 years before Chamberlain's article. The earliest feminist revisionist translation interests were focused on Bible translation. Like Sherry Simon makes clear that Bible translation has always been a political activity that produces text for a specific community or readership and hence adapts the text for that particular purpose. There is no absolute original biblical truth, though there are many claims to truth. Feminist translation approaches have also sought to reinterpret and rewrite the Bible differently in order to reflect the understanding of women's positions in society. They have sought to minimize the masculine bias in the language, and proposed a more inclusive language not only for the biblical materials but also for the services and ceremonies of Christian churches, and provided new translations of key passages from the original Hebrew Bible. So, this work is always prefaced and accompanied by explanations, and discussions of the intricacies of language and the meaning that were being wrestled with. Moreover, the purpose is generally stated as making the biblical messages accessible and meaningful to women as well in the contemporary social and intellectual climate, as the title of uh, translation, Hegrod's translation of four books of New Testament implies. The word for us is the title. On the one hand, the idea of writing a contemporary text for a reading public that is learning from learning from and responding to the upheavals caused by the women's movement and feminist thinking has been important throughout these Bible translations. On the other, contemporary feminist thought has opened translators' eyes to new ways of interpreting old ingrained meaning. Since translations are initiated and carried out in a certain context of the certain reasons, and political and cultural changes in this context will allow new ways of understanding. So von Plato's article on two differently literal English versions of the creation, uh, translated from Hebrew and published in 1876 by Julia Evelina Smith and in 1992 by Mary Phil Corsa, present this problematic of perception and context and its impact on the final text. A combination of basically gender interests, translation, and historical research and revisionism has been the most productive of new knowledge that has been produced recently. Uh, uh, in scholarship, a large and growing body of work in several different languages has unearthed and assessed the work of women translators throughout history. And the most recent publication is a series of portraits of women translators. So the translation and presentation of a large number of thus far untranslated women authors has been undertaken, and many individual articles have examined existing translations of important authors in light of new feminist research and approaches. This labor of re-examination and often subsequent retranslation has spread well beyond the Anglo-American sphere, with a productive working group focused on German and located in Australia. Further research interests developing in Spain and in other parts of Europe. Some other research initiatives have also been triggered by the problems encountered in translating contemporary, often experimental feminist writings across cultures, or simply in translating between very different cultures, especially once the realization set in that feminist ideas and politics are culturally specific and their impact is contingent upon social class, education, mobility, and many other factors. So critics like Gayatri Spivak, Christian Delphi, and Beverly Allen have all written about thoughtlessly imperialist aspects of certain approaches in Anglo-American feminisms, which are based on the undifferentiated notion that translation is a harmless, even benevolent form of communication, and that feminist ideas are transcultural. These critics show that translations can serve those who commission them by uncritically appropriating the texts of other cultures. Um, on the appropriation of feminist texts, Delphi suggests by translating away from the original culture and imposing certain hegemonic versions on the translated texts. Uh, on texts from developing countries in Western translation, or simply by disregarding the important cultural differences between closely related cultures. So the revisionist work inspired by new perceptions and positions on gender has proven enormously fruitful, both in terms of producing different knowledge and in checking up conventional perceptions of translation that have for many years assumed that a translation produces a near equivalent, though always weaker version of the source text and can usually be read and accepted in place of the foreign text. This attitude had not only rendered translators' work and intellectual achievements invisible, but also allowed them to deassemble uh, their interventions in the text. The critical voices of feminists and other translation critics of the past decades have now led to increasing visibility and responsibility of the translator and the entire translation process, including publishers, editors, translation patrons, reviewers, and readers included. I will now quickly move on to the next part of my talk, and I will try to sum it up as soon as possible. Um, so in this part, so I'll be talking about the contemporary focus on theater or stage and media translation, uh, that accompany the equally contemporary trend to view gender as a theatrical representation, as a performance, or as a performative activity in which the individual discursively and often parodically struts his or her particular gender affiliation. Gender as performance, as an act that adults can choose to perform, counters the assumption of a seamless, stable identity imposed or acquired from childhood. Based on the much discussed Gender Trouble by Judith Butler and the other work in queer studies, the notion has highlighted one of the great weaknesses of uh, Anglo-American feminist theorizing and current. Uh, the, that is, the term woman is stable across history, cultures, ideologies, and can be used as a basis or a category from which to engage in abstractions or political theorizing. Much has been written on this topic, and translation studies has, or the writings on translations also have felt the impact. One of the first to connect gender instability and translation was Carol Mayer. Indeed, she and uh, Kenny claim that translation is wonderfully suited to reveal such instability. It has probably this may seem paramount to striking the first paradigm from translation and translation studies. Yet, as Mayer explains, though gender may no longer be a clearly identifiable or an important issue, this contingency need not lead to a feeling of importance. Translation is always a representation, always a performance of another's work, and hence is invested with power. The point is that translators may choose to privilege women authors, say, or emphasize their own understanding of gender issues in a text, yet these are selective, performative aspects of translations and do not present intrinsic qualities of the text. An example of such selected performativity has been noted and criticized by Harvin Mann in her article on the massive two-volume collection entitled Women Writing in India. Mm, Mann points out that the editors of the collection focused on paradigm gender in compiling the materials, with the major criteria being that the work be written by women. Mann sees this as eliding issues of class difference and ethnicity, which she considers of far greater importance in the Indian context. So, similarly, Mayer's woman interrogated translation practice leads her to produce a translation of some famous texts on the philosophical writings of Maria Zambrano, that the first paradigm translation practitioners would doubtlessly find hard to understand. Mayer translates the second part of the title as 20 Years in Life of a Spaniard, deliberately eliding the fact that since the book has appeared in a series of women writers, there is a danger of misrepresenting Zambrano on who did not see herself as a woman philosopher. Uh, So similar ideas about gender as a contingent and only subjective, meaningful aspect of texts and translations are evident in recent studies focusing on Given's writing and translations as well. So in Harwood, in brief passages of Harwood, there is little very material on Harwood echoing the writings of Harwood echoes the realization that there is no one definition of woman that would hold within one culture or across diverse cultures. Keith Harvey's recent work also notes that the whole range of homosexual identities and in French and English fiction, which must be taken into account in the evaluation or translation of Camp Talk, should be considered. There is no one homosexual identity either. Instead, diverse contexts produce diverse identities and performance of these. So the basic idea here is even they want to question the idea of what is a woman, and they are of the opinion that this is what this idea also is very fluid and dynamic and depends on the socio-cultural milieu of a particular country or a place that we come from. So everything is getting questioned. So, and scholars like Harvey argues that the camp style privileged by certain of the American
I'm
Anglo-American homes.
afraid, but Dr. Abhishek, please, you'll have to conclude.
Sure, sure. I will try. Give me 2 minutes. Can I have 2 more minutes to come to a
Please
conclusion?
be quick.
Yeah, sure. All right. So, in one of the more recent work by Harvey pays even more closer attention to the presence of gay communities and their influence in allowing and encouraging certain types of textual translation and transformations. This is also a topic explored by Eric Kagan in his work. Though Lorca can hardly be seen as having produced discursively performative texts, his American translator and his American translator or adapter, Jack Spicer, belonging from a community as a backdrop, could turn Lorca subtitles into vulgar. So here too, there are echoes of assertive feminist translator who takes charge of the text and rewrites it for her identity reinforcing purposes. So, what basically uh, what basically goes on here is in this intersection is there are several critics who are still trying to question these stereotypical age-old norms or the metaphors that through which we had been describing translations, and how gender in translated literature also gets portrayed through where it goes through different hands of different sets of translator, or let's say translatress. So basically, so long we have always seen, like in the dominance of you know uh, male writers in literature, or in general writings, and the the dominance of male translators in translated work. So moving away from this, now there is increasingly there are writings which want to criticize this and which want to pave a path where there can be negotiations, and where they want to argue that translated works are not always inferior, and that women translators in literary historiography or in general in translation historiography should not be considered to hold a secondary position. So so both translated work and women translators should gain a spatial significance in our social as well as literary hierarchy and history. So I would like to end my talk here. Thank you. Thank you, everyone present here. And I thank the organizers once again for giving me this opportunity and this scope to talk about these basic issues that were going on in my mind. And I got a outlet here to discuss about. And thank you once again.
Thank you, sir, for your thoughtful speech. Now, I hand over the platform to Miss Aarti.
Good afternoon to all. I welcome you all for this afternoon technical session. Before, it's my immense pleasure to welcome and introduce our honorable chairperson of this session. We are delighted to have Dr. Ruchiraj Thakur, who is an assistant professor, Department of English, National Law University, Shimla, Himachal Pradesh, India. I welcome you, ma'am, for this occasion. And now the screen is yours, ma'am.
Uh, a very good afternoon to all the presenters. I wish you all the very best, and let's get to work. Let's start with the first presenter. And may I have Dr. Lamia?
Ruchi ma'am, you are announcing the name of second room participants.
Yes. Good
Don't
afternoon.
worry. Uh,
Good afternoon. Do you hear
yes.
me?
No, this is for conference room 1, ma'am.
Oh, okay, okay. Then
Sorry.
continue.
Yeah. Dr. Lamia is here.
Yes, I'm here. Good
Before
afternoon.
before we start, I most humbly would like to tell all the presenters to make their presentation for 10 minutes so that if
Yes.
there would be questions, we could take them. Yeah, let's start.
Yes. Thank you very much, ma'am. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Lemia Bukaru from the University of Constantine II, Algeria. Sorry for the voice, I'm ill. I would like to express my gratitude to Dr. Regin and PG Department of English for offering me this valuable opportunity to share ideas with my colleagues from different countries and mostly India. Well, I would like to share with you my screen. Yes. Well, sorry for taking time. Well, vous partagez. Yes. Well, do my screen appear to most of you?
Yes, it is. It is.
Yes, thank you very much. So the title of my work is Female Resistance of Patriarchy in Mariam Abbas' So Long a Letter. First, I would like to show you my outline so that you can follow my line of thoughts. I will start with an introduction, then feminism overview. Then I will go to Mariam Abbas as a Senegalese writer. I will mention the different ways that this writer mentioned in her novel to resist patriarchy, namely solidarity, refusal of polygamy, female agency. And then I will finish with the conclusion. Introduction. So patriarchy is a very old practice that women suffer from in either Eastern or Western societies. This made women conscious about their second-class status compared to their male counterparts. They were raised up to be inferior right from their birth. Social constraints tend to constantly limit women's freedom and instill in their minds certain images and norms that women should adhere to, otherwise they would be rejected by the society. Millet Kate in 1970 criticized fiercely this practice and called patriarchy as an interior colonization. This made many movements or worldwide feminist movements to emerge to defend and restore female dignity, voice the silenced women, and resist female oppression. Overview of feminism. According to Friedman, women and men are born to be equal worth, but it's the society which makes the line between the two sexes, making men privileged. Bell Hooks on her side believes that Black feminists' main purpose is to unite feminist efforts to end patriarchal domination because they insist on the eradication of exploitation and oppression in the family context and in all other intimate relationships. All in all, We know that feminism has different movements: white, black, Africana womanism, etc. But generally, the main purpose of feminism is to establish a society based on equality and to eradicate males' oppression, exploitation, to change stereotypes that women are just dependent species that should be guided by males, and to give chance to the oppressed women to prove that women have the mental capacity to participate in the society's political, intellectual, social, and economic developments. Concerning Mariam Abbas, the choice of this presentation, she is a Senegalese female writer who, through the work entitled So Long a Letter, wants to highlight the issue of women's suffering and the patriarchy in the African society and how Muslim males hide their base desires towards women under the cover of religion. It's true that polygamy is permitted in Islam, but under strict circumstances and conditions which these males neglect and do not respect. The novel, So Long Letter, shows in various occasions the degrading uh, sorry the degrading vision and social status and the negative stereotypes males have about women. When we refer to the novel, when the character or the male character Maudu wanted to marry his daughter's best friend, he asked her to stop studying and offers to pay her instead. He offers her a villa, Mecca for her parents, a car, a monthly allowance, and jewels. Here, in other words, he wants to buy her with money. He buys youth because the girl is at the age of his daughter with money. Another character, when Madu's mother offered the second wife to her son Madu, she stated, "My brother Farba has given you young Nabu to be your wife," as if young Nabu here, who is a female character, is an object to be handed from one person to another, from her father to the husband, without her permission or without her conviction. In another situation, Madhu describes Nabu as a plate of food. So the person, a female girl, is equated with a plate of food. Another situation, when Ramatullah became widow and her husband's brother asked for her hand. As a reaction, she angrily stated, "You forget that I have a heart, a mind, and I'm not an object to be passed from one hand to another." So this is generally the society, how it looks to women. They are mere objects. This is what Mariam Abba wants to stress in her novel. As a form of resistance of these practices, certain female characters showed resistance and harsh refusal of such degrading male practices towards women. The first mean here, solidarity. Many female characters here unite and tend to assist each other to overcome or at least minimize the negative effects of patriarchy on them. Ramatullah's letter opens with an affirmation of her friend's Aistu's great contribution to mitigate with her pains. She states, "My prop in my distress, our long association has taught me that confiding in others lies pain. Your presence in my life is by no means fortuitous." Here, this shows the crucial role Aisatu plays in Ramatullah's life. She is the source of her relief. Aisatu, my friend, perhaps I'm boring you by relating what you already know. Here, the expression "what you already know," this means that Aisatu already know the story of Ramatullah, and Ramatullah is recounting it, it's not for information or just informing her about what happens to her. It's a sign of relief to get rid of her interior anger and distress. Another one, we were true sisters destined for the same mission of emancipation. Emancipation here is to get rid of social constraints and patriarchy. And we also notice in this novel that there is a lot of use of the pronoun we. This means these female characters try to assist each other to mitigate with patriarchy practices. There is another situation when Maudu got married to a young girl and offered her, as I have said, villa, etc., and money. He neglected his children and he let them suffer in poverty. As a reaction, Aisatu bought a car to Ramatullah to help her take her children to school. In the novel, she said Ramatullah to Aisatu, "I shall never forget your response. You, my sister, nor my joy and my surprise when I was called to Fiat's agency and was told to choose a car which you had paid for in full. My children gave cries of joy when they learned of the approaching." So Aisatu helped Ramatullah to overcome her poverty and to help her children in life. Another quotation from the novel, of course: "These caressing words which relax me are indeed from you." So Aisatu words relax a lot Ramatullah's pain and stress. Daba, who is the daughter of Ramatullah, is here beside me, light-hearted, smiling with all her teeth at a mission successfully accomplished. Here, the daughter of Ramatullah, who is the eldest sister, helps her mother when the father left them to get married to a young girl. The second way is refusal of polygamy. Here, there are two main female characters in the novel who showed rebellion and total refusal of polygamy. The first one is Aisatu, who decided to break with her husband Maudu when he decided to remarry. In the novel, in Aramatullah's words, "You choose to make a break, a one-way journey with your 4 sons, leaving this letter for Madu in clear view on the bed that used to be yours." So when her husband decided to get married again, she left him and went to France. She took the children and took responsibility of her life and established an independent life. The second female character here is the daughter of Rabatullah, Daba, who refused that her mother accepts the marriage or the remarriage of her father with a girl of her age. Daba stated to her mother in the novel, "Break with him, mother. Send this man away." Man here is the father of Daba. He has respected neither you nor me. Do what Auntie Aisutu did. Break with him. Tell me you will break with him. I can't see you fighting over a man with a girl of my age. So here Daba pushes her mother to get rid of the father who break with them and choose to establish another life with a younger girl. The third mean, female agency. Here, as I have said before, Aisutu is the main female character who rebelled on patriarchy, and as a reaction, she went to France. She established an independent life from her husband. She took responsibility of the children, and this is revealed in the novel when Ramatullah said to Aisatu, "And you left. You had the surprising courage to take your life into your own hands. You rented a house and set up home there. And instead of looking backward, you looked resolutely to the future. You set yourself a difficult task, a more than just my presence and my encouragements. Books saved you. Having become your refuge, they sustained you. And when Ramatul Aissatou went to France, she succeeded in her mission. So your sons were growing up well, contrary to all predictions. Here, predictions of the society, the stereotype of the society about women says that women can't establish an independent life and raise up her sons without the help of the father. So, contrary to all predictions, you didn't care about Madu. Yes, indeed, there you were. The past crashed beneath your heel. So, the second example of female agency, it's this time for Ramatullah. After Maudu left her, she took responsibility to run her son's and daughter's life, to think of everything, to manage a living and rely only on herself, buying, cooking, supervising the children, and fulfilling male's tasks at home and outside home. When another example, when Aissatou bought a car to Ramatullah to help her take the children to school, at the beginning Ramatullah didn't know how to drive, but
Dr. Lamia, you'll have to conclude.
yes,
Conclude it
yes, no
quickly.
problem. Yes, okay. She learned to drive for her children. So, as a conclusion, though females tend to resist all forms of male oppression, humiliation, and exploitation in the society, patriarchy continues to exist with differing degrees. It all depends on how each woman decides to make her life the way she wants. Thank you very much for your listening, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Yes, I have finished, ma'am.
Yeah. Any questions for Dr. Lamia?